Okay, we are now recording the session. Now, before we get started, did everyone download the intermediate data that was sent out by Catherine Palmer? If not, let me know. I can send the link to the Dropbox right now.
No, would you mind sending the link, please?
Yeah, I can send it.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, I see someone else didn't get it. I'm going to grab the link and send that. Okay. Now, 1 second.
So I'm going to post the link in the chat in just a minute.
Okay, and we're going to get started into fuzzy match. If you don't have the data yet, that's okay. I'll go slow and make sure that you understand everything. And also at the end, I will be sending all the workflows too with the data. So if you don't have them, then make sure you'll have them at the end. Okay, so let's get started into fuzzy match. Okay, Alex just sent the link for the Dropbox. So if you don't have those, download it now. So fuzzy match is a tool that you bring on when your data set has a bunch of different string of characters that look similar, but Alteryx doesn't know that they're similar. So let's say you have a hard-coded employee list that the employees should be John Doe, but you have another list that someone typed up and John is spelled backwards, the N and the H are switched, but when you log the data, Alteryx doesn't know that these are different, doesn't know that these are the same because they're not spelled exactly the same. So fuzzy match is the tool that we use in this case. This is a tool here. It's in the join section. So let's bring in a data set to take a look at what this does. The file I'm going to be using now is the transactions fuzzy match that I sent in the intermediate data, if you want to follow along. Okay, I'm going to run that in. So looking at the data, we can see we have all of these transaction IDs, the date the transaction was made, and the account holder that corresponds with that ID and date. So we have some that are similar. We have Glenn ampersand Allen's Hardware Co. We also have Glenn and Allen's Hardware Company. So we know that these are the same, but Alteryx doesn't. Now looking further into this, we have Brownsville, Department of Revenue, Brownsville, Department of Revenue, department is spelled differently. We have another Brownsville, Department of Transportation, and Colorado Textile. So these look similar, and these also look similar. Now, going through the fuzzy match, there's two different methods you can use. You can either use the merge method, which is going to compare the data to an original source, and the purge mode will compare all of them to each other. So in this case, we don't have a reference data set saying this is the way that all of these companies should be spelled. This is the way we want it. We don't have that. So what we're going to do is the purge mode, and that is going to compare all the records to each other. So going in this tool configuration, we're going to choose a record ID field. A record ID field is crucial because we need to differentiate Glenn and Allen's from Glenn and Allen's. So having all of these IDs is going to differentiate which row matches to which row. So we're going to choose our transaction ID for the record ID. Then what we want to do is choose what field we're matching on. So we want to say which ones of the account holder are going to be the same. Now, you can also choose a match style, which you can see here. There are many different types that we can match. In this case, we're going to do company name. So we're going to say that it's a company name so Alteryx knows, and it's going to kind of remove words like and. If we look inside of here, we can see and of the co and inc are not going to be taken account into the key that is made. So I'll show you what the key looks like as well. Now, we also want to choose a match threshold. So we want to say how much these items are going to match to each other. If we did 100%, they would be exactly the same. They're 50%, they're less likely to match, but they would have similar things in common. I like to do 75, 80, just depending on what you're doing. And you can also change this as much as you want. So change this back to company. And then I'm going to show you what the key looks like, and I'm going to output a match score. Now, since I specified that we want to compare all these account holders to each other, the output is going to look like this. This is a little confusing. It doesn't tell you what records are being compared. You would have to come back here. So it's saying in the first line, transaction ID 3 looks like transaction ID 7. So if we look at that, Wolfman Co. looks like Wolfman Co. LLC. Now we're going to add these account holders back into this so we can see what this looks like. But it's saying that these matched 92%. This is an overall match. So these overall matched 92. The account holders themselves matched 92. Notice you can match on multiple fields. In this case, we only matched on one. So this is still output even though they're the same. Now, the match key is generated based off of, I believe it's phonetics and alphanumeric. So it's going to give ALFM to transaction ID 1 and transaction ID 7. And those are going to be compared. And the rest of these are all given specific ones and will be matched on there. So what we want to do is join back the account holder so we can see this more at a glance. Now, what I'm going to do is use a unique tool. Notice we have duplicates for 3 and 7, 3 and 7, because they are matched on multiple match keys. So I'm going to just do all the unique matches here and drop the duplicates. Now there's 4 duplicates, and now we're down to, there was 5 duplicates, and we're down to 4 unique combinations of matches. Now I'm going to use a find replace tool to match these back. We're going to connect this here, U, and we're going to connect these, and then connect the R back to, oh, 1 second. We need to specify that the ID is a string. So we're going to put a select tool here. We're going to change this to a string so that we can match back. So we're going to say find transaction ID 2. Let's rerun it. Transaction ID 2, and then we're going to connect this output of the select to the R. And then within this, we're going to say transaction ID. Then append fields account holder. Now you'll see what this does. Now we have the account holders that correspond with these transaction IDs. And we're going to have to do this again for the next row, just so we can visualize everything. We're going to do the same exact thing, but now for transaction ID 2. Also, if I'm going too fast and there's anything else that needs to be explained, please let me know. And I can take a second to catch up. So I'm going to use the select tool and clean all of this up. Okay. I'm going to say this first one. Alteryx thinks this. Looks like this. I'm going to bring this match score down. This. Now, this will make things easier to look at and give a better explanation. So these transaction IDs were matched on this key. And what that means is Alteryx thinks this Brownsville Department of Revenue looks like this Brownsville DEPT of Revenue, 87%. And now the same going down here. Now, if we wanted to look back at the original data, remember we had Glenn and Allen's Hardware Company. Now these weren't matched. And why this happened was because our threshold was very high and these didn't match that much percent. So we're going to lower our threshold here. Edit within here. We're also going to add an ampersand. So we are going to say, don't generate a key for an ampersand as well, because the ampersand looks like the and. And then here, let's just lower our match ID or match threshold to 70. Okay, now running this, looking at the output, we can see that Glenn and Allen's Hardware Company were matched 81%. So since we added the ampersand and we lowered the threshold, then this is now put in the output. Does anyone have any questions? I know this is a lot to take in and it's a little bit confusing at first, but I promise it's not that hard. I can clarify if necessary. Also, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat. Oh, could you start this? Sorry, I just saw the chat right now. Could you step through this from the start? Yes. I'll start from the beginning. So what I did was I brought in this file, transactions, fuzzy match. And then what I did here was I changed the transaction ID to a string. It was a double coming in, and after the select, I changed it to a string. The reason I did this is the find replace tool. The find replace tool is similar to a VLOOKUP. So what we were doing is comparing the transaction ID that was output from the fuzzy match to the original transaction ID from the data and taking that account holder and appending it. So let's go to the next step and appending that onto the end. But in order to do this, the find and replace tool needs to have corresponding metadata. So we needed to change the first one to a string so that it could be compared to the output of the fuzzy match, which came out as a string. Then after I did that, these tools don't look very nice with their output, so I'm just gonna move them around so you can make sure you see all the connections. But at the fuzzy match, I chose purge mode. You use purge mode when you're comparing them all to each other, which is what we did. In this case, because we didn't have a reference data. The next example I will go through is a master data set comparing to another data set, which is the merge mode example, but this is purge mode. And the record ID field is going to be the transaction ID because this differentiates each row from each other. I changed the match threshold to 70, saying if these match up to 70% or above 70%, then output them. I changed the field, or I chose field name to be the match field. So account holder is going to be matched on, and these will all be compared. And then within this field name, I clicked edit, and I added an ampersand. And this ampersand is going to be skipped over when the key is generated.
Could you explain that? What is a key exactly? So like, I'm sure that I'll have many different data sets that'll be a lot of different keys.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell me, like, what does a key do? Like just tell me more about it. It seems very new. I'm not sure how to interpret that. Like, what is it actually doing?
So if you look here, actually I'm going to go to the output so we can see this a little bit better. ALFM is a key that was generated for Wolfman category. So I'm not sure what the specific letters stand for. I think it's with some phonetics. It's an advanced thing within Alteryx where it does it based off the way it sounds alphanumerically. It's a little confusing, but Wolfman, you can see that whenever Wolfman is mentioned, the key is ALFM. So that's the key that's being assigned to 3, 3, and 4, and also 4, 7, and 7. And then it's joining those together and saying that they're similar. So you can see here, 3 looks like 4 because it has ALFM. 3 looks also like 7, and that is with ALFM. And you can see 4 is being compared to 7 here because it has the same key. But all of these are similar. It's just comparing them differently. Is there any questions on that?
No, I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I just output them just to show you what's happening. Usually I don't output them. It's just an option in the advanced so you can see what's being compared and which ones are being matched and why. Maybe if you have a very large data set and it's comparing different companies together or different names that shouldn't be compared, then you can output the key and you can see why are these being matched? Why is their key the same? And you can just uncheck it here and check it there. We can also output unmatched records. So I'll show you what that looks like as well. And it's going to give a null for the match. So it's going to compare them to each other, saying, because it needs to have an output to compare them. So it's saying, this one looks like this. It doesn't look like anything else. So we're just going to give it a score of null because it doesn't look like anything. And it's just going to output the same one next to each other. So this is if you just want to see the nulls. And a way to do this, to just look at all the unmatched. You can say this much. Oh, we'll use a filter. This is also a way to double check and make sure that things that should be matching are being matched. So here, these were all records that were unmatched. Now, Wolfman company should have been matched to something. But notice the key is different because company is spelled differently. These were all the unmatched fields. So going back, after the fuzzy match, I took the unique tool. Now the reason I did this.
Sorry to interrupt.
Of course.
May I ask another question regarding the fuzzy match too? So when you click the fuzzy match, there's like a match threshold, but when you click the edit, on the specific name, field name, there's another match threshold. So may I ask what's the differences between these two?
Yes. So inside this tool, you're choosing the threshold for the field that you're choosing. And this is an overall threshold of that. So if you had multiple fields that you're matching on, let's say you had a data set with a name and a phone number, and you wanted to make sure that the phone number to the name matched for all of them, because someone could have the same name but a different phone number, but that means they're different people. So you would choose name here, and then you could edit the threshold to say, we want it to match on the name 80%. And we want it to match on the phone number maybe 100%. So that is where you're going to edit the individual fields. And outside of this, you're going to choose the overall match threshold, which is going to say it's going to make a 70% combination of the fields that you choose.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I always make sure that the field threshold is the threshold that you're choosing, because sometimes it won't change if you don't change it out here. Because this is doing the overall match, and this is doing the match on the account holder field, which is in this case the most important because that's the only field that we're matching on.
So is it fair to say if we have multiple fields that we're matching on, and they're both, we go into their respective edits and set them at 75%, but then the overall match thresholds set at 75%. That doesn't mean you're going to get everything from everything that matched at 75. You'd probably get like a limited subset, right? Because if it's 75 here and 75 there, then that's maybe just to make up a number that might only be a 40% match instead of actually 75, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks.
And that's why you can see here, this match score that's output is the match score of the overall, which has to do with this. And this match score is the match on the specific field that you're matching on. So this one we set to 70 and this one we set to 70. In this case, they're exactly the same, but when you add more fields into it, that's when you start changing the thresholds there. Is there any more questions before I go to the next step? I know this is it's a very confusing tool, so please ask away.
Could you please click on your unique tool so I can see what's in there, please?
Yeah.
Just those two. Okay.
Yeah. So I chose the unique combinations of transaction ID and transaction ID 2 because if you look at the input, what's coming out of the fuzzy match, you can see, let's see any duplicates. 14 and 15, 14 and 16. They're, oh, here. Where's the duplicates? These. So 1 and 8 matched with this match key, and 1 and 8 also matched with this match key. So that's why you can keep everything, but when I'm doing it at the end, I want to have just one record of each match rather than the same thing over and over again. But it's just going to take the first match key and output it. So if we didn't do this unique tool, then we would have a lot more records. But this is just unique combinations that were matched. Or else these would be duplicated over and over and over again, which is not that necessary to your analysis unless you're looking at the match keys. Okay, so after I took the unique, that is when I used the find and replace tool. I'll explain this tool again. So you're looking for a place where you're finding your data and a place where you're replacing the data. So from the F input, I connected all of the uniques. So I'm saying find these and replace it with this. So within this transaction ID, which is what I chose for the first one. So I'm saying find this transaction ID and then go to this data set, find that corresponding transaction ID and take the account holder, which is what I did here, append fields to record, and I just appended account holder. This is similar to a join, but it's very specific where it just takes wherever this matches this, bring this from the other data set and put it on this. Like I don't want to join them together. I don't care what's unmatched. I just want this to come to this data set. And you can replace it as well. I wanted to append it so I could keep the transaction IDs. But coming out of this tool, you can see that this was the source data set, and then I'm just going and finding these values from transaction ID and adding them onto the end. And then I did the same thing. The next tool is the same configuration. I just changed find transaction ID to. So now it's looking at this column instead of this column, and it's saying, do the same exact thing from that original data set. Anywhere you see these, I want this output. Then you can see this is added on the end, and I just added the account holder name again. Then with the select tool, I just renamed and moved the columns around so you could see, I just named them in a way that is readable and digestible. So Alteryx sync this looks like this much. Okay, is there any questions? I can go through.
I don't
Sorry?
have transaction ID 2 in that second find replace, and I can't figure out why. In the drop down, I have transaction ID.
Okay, let's make sure your anchors are going to the right place.
Yep.
Also, another thing, did you run it after you chose this?
Let me do that real quick.
Okay. That could always be an issue too. Sometimes the column names don't transfer to the next tool until you run it.
No, I have transaction ID and account holder.
Okay,
What?
so I'm going to highlight over this R anchor.
Mhm.
It's coming out of the select tool from the R. Does that look right? Here's the connections again, just to.
Yeah, my lines are. Oh no, I have them reversed. Okay.
Okay. Quick fix you can do with that is you can right click on the tool or right click on the connection, and you can either delete the connection, but if you don't have one connected, then you can right click and then you can switch output. But I can't do it because I'm connected. But if I do this, you can say switch destination, and then it's just going to switch like that.
Okay.
And also when you're dragging connections, you have to drag it from the output of one to the input. You can't drag from R. You can't drag from right to left. It has to be left to right.
In the fuzzy match tool, can you talk about the different match functions? Like what's the purpose of each one?
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is we are comparing all of these account holders to each other. But the flaw with this is there's no right answer. There's no correct way to spell Wolfman Company, clearly because there's 6 different ways someone's inputting it. But that is with the purge mode. So you're just going to connect these to each other, and then it's going to say, this looks like this. That looks like that. This also looks like this. But that's what the output of the purge method is going to look like. When we're using the merge method, I'll give an example of that. I have some data that I can show you. So that is going to be comparing a master data set to something like this. So the next data set that we have is this same random spelling, but we also have a data set that goes in and it's saying this is the correct spelling of all of them. Group them together and compare the misspelling to the master and output what they should look like. But I'll go through that in the next example. For this one, it is the purge.
In the edit match options, there's like a match function dropdown. And then
Here?
If you click on edit,
Mhm.
and then in the middle there's yeah. So like what's the difference between the different options here?
To be honest, I haven't gone that far in depth into these. I'm sure if you go to the Alteryx community, you could look into these, but you can see that these match styles change based off what you select. So here we're choosing phone number, and then this match function changes. So this key changed to digits only. Oops. But changing all of these match styles, oh my God, why is that? It changes. So I'm sure it has something to do with the style of the input and what's best for that specific style. I'm sorry, I don't have much knowledge in that section.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions before we move on to the next example, which is going to be the merge mode?
Can you click in your find replace just one more time? Sorry.
So I have purge mode selected, transaction ID, is it record ID?
Oh,
Field
sorry.
name.
Sorry, the second fuzzy match.
Oh, this, the unique?
She was asking for the find and replace.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
sorry. Find
okay.
and replace. I'm not kidding.
Sorry. Thank you, Alex.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the difference between this one and this one is just specifying they're coming from the same place and they're coming from the same stream. But for the first one, I'm comparing it to transaction ID 1 because I want all of these values. And then the next one, I'm getting transaction ID 2 because I want these values that correspond with those.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's do the next example. All right, we're going to bring in our merge transactions file. Okay, so before we get started, let's take a look at this data set. We have our transaction IDs, transaction date, and we have account holders. And these are the same account holders from the first file. So these are all the ones that are spelled differently, and they're all over the place. Now, in order to specify which ones are the, I would say, guesses and which ones are the truth. So you need to have a source field, and this source is going to specify where they're coming from. So you just need to have an identifier of the two. So that's going to be this column. We have our source, and that's going to be transactions table. And then here we have the correct spelling for all of these companies the way that they should be. And we have an ID for those. And we also have a source specified within the source field of where those are coming from. So when we configure the fuzzy match, we're going to say we want to compare these, see which ones they match to in the supplier table. So let's just use a fuzzy match. And in this configuration, we are going to choose the merge method. Now, to have a source ID field is where they differentiate, which is where we're going to do this source field. Okay, so one more time, I'm choosing the merge method, and I am choosing the source ID field that differentiates them as the source field. Then field name, I'm going to choose account holder. Oh, and the record ID in this case, we can't choose transaction ID or supplier ID. Notice because they have different IDs in different columns. So the only thing that's differentiating here now is the account holder. So we're going to make account holder the record ID. If if we chose transaction ID, it wouldn't work because we don't have an ID for these columns. So Alteryx is going to get confused because there's no ID for each column and they're not going to be output. So down at the bottom, let's get the match score. Okay. Now let's go in the edit and let's change this to company name. Let's just put in the ampersand again. And let's put this threshold. Actually, let's just keep it at 85 and see what's output, and then we can play around with the threshold after and see if we can get any more. Okay. Got it. Now let's run it. And the output of this is a lot cleaner than the purge method. I think if you're going to be using the fuzzy match, I would definitely recommend using the merge method and having, if you don't have one already, just creating a reference field so that you can compare them to each other. So going line by line, you can see what's being compared to the master data and what's being matched. So I'd always go through and double check to make sure that everything's matched correctly, because this is a fuzzy match. Alteryx is really just trying its best. Nothing is going to be 100%. So if you have a bunch of rows of data, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to eyeball them. I had someone yesterday using this tool, and I think they had 400,000 rows of data, and they had to go through and just make sure that the match was correct. But it's a risk you're willing to take if you just want to blind trust in the computer. So just going, checking all of these. These look good. Try these. Now let's also see the unmatched.
Because we're saying don't consider co and LLC and those sorts of things, wouldn't like 1 and 2 Wolfmen and Wolfmen be 100% match score?
No, because it's not generating the key off of that, but it's taking, I think it's taking the amount of characters and the spelling as well. So that's not the only factor that it's taking.
Gotcha.
Now notice here, this was unmatched. So let's try to match that. Let's go in here. So we have co that's not generating a key. Let's go just to see if this changes anything. Now it's still unmatched. Let's drop the threshold. Put it at 70. And see if we can get that to match. And again, there's always some troubleshooting. Oh, there we go. Now it's connecting. There's always some troubleshooting within the tool. Just play around with your match thresholds and the percentages just to see if you can match the ones that are unmatched that you want to match. So in that case, it worked. Sometimes it won't. Here, this isn't being matched to anything. Candlewick, but we don't have. If we look at the original data set, Candlewick research is what we wanted to match to. But for some reason, it's not picking up. And there's some flaws with this tool, but I think for what it does and what you can get from this is great. If this happens to you, I would just do this. And I would take out all the nulls for the match. And then run the fuzzy match again and just keep trying. Take out the ones that match. Okay. So these are all the unmatched ones. Take these and then compare them to your original. So we want Wolfman. Wolfman still not picking up. We have Co and LLC. let's look in here. Let's add LLC to this. See if it picks it up now. Now it was matched, so that's dropped. Next one, let's see. And this is all just playing around with it and seeing what you can do. But now that you know about the keywords, you can put those in here just to not generate the keys off of those, and you can put as many as you want in here. Is there any questions?
I just have a quick question. So on my fuzzy match, I selected generate or like output the generated key. And so there's 26 records that go into the fuzzy match, but then 36 that come out because some of the account holder names are matched on multiple keys.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. So it's not a 1-for-1. You might run through it and then throw it into a summarize tool afterwards to see your unique matches.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's why I use the unique here, because we had so many of those double matches as well. But since we weren't really interested in the keys here, we just got rid of those. But yeah, no, it would be cool to use a summarize and then concatenate those together, see what the keys were. Does anyone have any questions? We can go through another example of this as well. If there's anything that seems a little confusing, please let me know. This tool is so powerful, and if you can get it to work, it's pretty awesome. Let's try to match these last few. We have Candlewick Research Department. Let's look what it looks like. Candlewick Research. Does anyone have an idea of what we can do to get those to match?
If you add DEPT to the exclusions, I got them to match up.
Oh, you did? Nice. Yeah. Okay. Let's try it out. Great. Yeah. Now this last one, why are these not being matched? Okay, Candle. What was it? Brownsville Department of Revenue and Transportation. Looks like there's double space. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but did you get those to match as well?
It looks like they are. Yeah, I don't have any null values.
Okay. Let's see. Maybe our thresholds were different too, but nice. I'm glad you got it to work. Okay, let's do another example, and I will let you all figure this one out on your own based off what we learned. Okay, we're going to bring in the accounts XLXX. Okay, oh, this one. Okay. So we have this data set of 6 names. Now we want all of these to match. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to figure it out. If there's any questions, put them in the chat. Let me know. If you don't have this data set, let me know. I can email it to you really quick. There's an issue, but I want everyone to do their best to attempt this. I know it's a little hard. I'm going to solve it on my own, so that's why I'm bringing it to the side. And then we'll go over it after this. But I'm going to put this little timer up. Oops. And then do your best. Feel free to ask questions too. I will be here. If you don't feel comfortable speaking out loud, that's also fine. Write it in the chat. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, sorry, just to specify, we are using this accounts XLSX file, and it should look like this. I'm gonna mute myself so you don't hear my clicking. Also, keep in mind the two examples we just did and look at this data set and think about which mode that we need to use for fuzzy match. Also, if you're struggling, that's fine. We're gonna go I'll walk you through this workflow and make sure that you come out of here knowing how to do this. So don't feel discouraged if you're struggling. This is a hard topic. Also, if you finish, maybe put done in the chat so I know we don't need this much time. Just let me know. We can jump back on and walk through it. Okay, I'm gonna end this timer early. So it doesn't go off. And then I'll show my workflow. Does anyone want to share what they did instead of me explaining it? If you're not comfortable, that's totally fine. You can walk through, but just opening up the floor. Okay, I'll show mine. So with this account data, let's look at it. Robert Paulson is the same as Robert Paulson. One spelled with an E, one spelled with an O. Nickname for Robert could also be Bob. So this is also the same person, just spelled differently. And Norman Peterson, we have Norm and Norman. So using the fuzzy match. Nice Fight Club reference. Is this, I've never seen Fight Club. I'm so sorry if that offends anyone, but that's sad that I didn't catch that.
I'm offended by it.
Robert Paulson is a character. Okay. Got it. So from this output, it basically figured out that Robert Paulson is the same as Robert Paulson, just spelled with an E. Robert and Bob are the same. Norman and Norm are the same, and Robert and Robert Paulson with E and O are the same. Did everyone get this? Did anyone do anything differently? Is there any issues? All right. So sounds like everyone did this successfully. Let's try something. Oh, can you please show us the fuzzy match? Yes. I have an idea. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a master reference sheet. And then I'm going to have you guys use the merge method. Here's the fuzzy match. Sorry. Hopefully everyone can see that. Is there any questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question. So what if there are two people, they share the same address and the same phone number, but their name are completely different? So with the setting, I see you're only comparing account holder field.
Yes.
So, I mean, with the scenario I just mentioned, are we supposed to consider them as similar as well?
Yeah, so if we're looking here in the data set, similar to the example you just mentioned, if someone has the same name and the same address and the same phone number, they probably live together and they share a phone. So that's something that you know. But if you are, let's say you want to pull them out separately, you would use the address as well to differentiate them as different people. But for now, using this, it recognizes that they're different people. But if you join them together, then it's going to recognize those each individually.
Okay. I guess I didn't express myself clearly.
Oh.
What I mean is what if it's two person, they have the same primary address, they have the same phone number, but they have a different name, but we still want to consider them as the same person among all these 6 persons. Is there any way we can do that as well? Kind of like a merge two kind of method into one.
We could try it.
Okay. By the way, thank you.
I haven't done anything like that before. I like that question. I think that could be fun to try. Let's try it. So, okay, just to clarify your question. So we want to make these people, because they have the same address and phone number, considered the same person.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's, instead of account holder, let's delete this. Let's go on address first. And let's see what comes out of here. Oh, mixing match field. Okay. So we have Norman and Norm. Or no, we have Norm, Peterson, and Carla with the same exact address. Those are the only ones output because their address is exactly the same. Match score of 100. Let's, I guess then here, what I would do is if they match 100%, the phone number and the address, then maybe what I would do here is just, let's use, sorry, I've never done anything like this before. I'm kind of thinking of what would be best to do. So since these match, let's just take Norm and then find replace here. And instead of appending, let's replace. So let's take the first ID, account ID from account ID, and then let's replace him. Let's replace primary account holder. It's gonna do this. Let's see. Oh no, this is replacing. Okay, we don't want this.
I feel like there's just multiple pieces of logic. Like you would just want to, like I would copy and do multiple fuzzy matches on the same thing, but just have like one is for account ID, the other one would be for matching on like address and phone number. And then
Okay.
once you figure out those uniques, then like union them together and be like,
Yeah.
oh, I know that these people matched on name, but these people matched on address. It's still like a manual sort at the end of the day where you have to do all that work to figure out which one's right.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Alex, do you want to try that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your
Yeah,
idea.
maybe that's something you could do on the break, and then in the office hours at the end, you can show me if you're still around. I think that would be something fun to do.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. I like that idea. Was that Andrew who was speaking? I think, yes. So
Sure.
that was
But
Andrew.
I don't want any credit. That might be a bad idea.
Well, I mean, it's worth a try. I feel like nothing's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Unless you try it. But, okay. Now, what I want to do here, we're going to create our own merge field. So let's build some data. Let's use a text input tool. And we're just going to match the formatting here. It's going to be primary account holder. Okay, so we have 3 people in this data set. We want to specify what is the correct spelling for all of these. So let's just do, Robert Paulson with the O-N. Is that how it's spelled in the movie? With the O-N or the E-N? Probably with the O-N since Bob Paulson is there too. So let's take that one. And then we need to have a column that's going to say source. This is what we group on, and then we're going to call this, just call it master. Okay, and then we have, who's the next person? Norman Peterson. And the last person was Carla Tortelli. I almost said tortellini. Telly. Okay. Now just make sure it says master in all of these. We could also do this with the formula tool if we wanted to. But we're just gonna, there's only 3, so we're just gonna manually input them. All right, and then let's run this just to put it in. So we also need a source field here. Let's take this. I just highlighted all of these. I'm just gonna move this up. So we're not focused on this right now. We need a field that identifies these. We're gonna stick a formula. We're gonna call this source. Going too fast, please let me know. And we're gonna call this group by. Oh, also we need quotes around this. Okay, now let's grab a select tool. And we're just gonna drop all the other address information. So for now, we're just gonna keep primary account holder and the source. Just for now. And now we have our masters and our guesses. Now let's use a union tool. We went over the union tool in last presentation. This is just going to stack them on top of each other. And we're going to auto-config by name. Looking at the inputs, they have the same name, so they're going to just stack on top of each other. Let's look at the output, and we have our guesses on top. We have our masters on the bottom. Then let's grab a fuzzy match. Okay, now we're going to use a merge mode. Can someone help me configure this? There's no bad guesses. What are we going to use for the source ID field? Does anyone have an idea?
Source.
Yes. Now remember, this is the part where you're differentiating different sources. So ours was very straightforward, but if yours was named something different, maybe department, just make sure that you know that this is a source. Record ID, does anyone have a guess?
Primary account holder.
Yes. And then going to match primary account holders. Then let's do name. Let's do name with nicknames. I haven't done that one before, so it should probably work. Let's get the match score as well, output. Now I'm running it. Let's see. Carla was matched 100%. Norman Peterson was matched 100%. Bob and Robert. Okay, that's where the nickname comes in. Bob and Robert. Robert Paulson with the E. Nice, so these are all matched, and let's just put output unmatched records to verify, and then filter on those just to see what the match score is. No. Let's take a look. We have 2 that were unmatched. Norm Peterson and Bob Paulson. Should have been matched, but I guess we would have to change the threshold down. On 75. It was still unmatched. Okay.
Did that
See what we
supposed to be
do.
where it's comparing the field to itself?
Yes. Yeah, so this is saying this is not matching since I output unmatched records. It's just comparing them to each other because you need to fill in both of these columns. And then notice that there's no match score. So the 100% are going to compare them to themselves, but these are the same thing, but they don't have a match score, so they didn't match. And Bob Paulson also didn't match. I wonder why they're so. Why these did not go through. Again, they were matched here. Bob Paulson and Norm were matched here. Did anyone get theirs to match?
I think you need to change your match style again.
Okay. I'm just gonna do name instead of nicknames. Oh, now we have more. Oh, let's turn this down. Got one more. But again, this tool is not perfect, as you can see. So just playing around with it, seeing what settings work best for you. Make sure you look and see that things are working correctly always.
Can you go over why you put that formula in there again, please?
Yeah. So the field that I was using to differentiate was source. I created the source that said master on this data set, but I don't have anything that differentiates this data set from the other with the source field. So I just added a formula, and when you add a new formula on and you don't put a formula within it, you can put anything like a number or quotes, and it's just gonna do the same thing all the way down. So since I put guess, it's gonna just create a record for every single record in that field that says guess in strings.
So are you just adding a column source so you can match on it? Okay.
Yeah. So I could have done that here, but we just manually input them. I wanted to delete this column and then do this, create a new column called source, and then just name this guess. You always need something to distinguish on, so just always keep that in mind. Oh, that's not the guess. It's the real. So I'm just creating distinguishable columns on them using that source field. And then when you union them together, they're all going to stack on top of each other since they have the same name. But this is a distinguishable field that we chose within the fuzzy match for the merge for the source ID. Does anyone have any more questions? This is the end of the curriculum that I have for fuzzy match today. We have 15 more minutes in this session. I'm not going to move on just because I know today is really long, so we have a strict schedule, and people are going to drop in to watch the topics that they're interested on based on the time. So this next 15 minutes, we'll take questions. If not, I'll stop recording and then we can take a break until the spatial section. But for now, open for questions. And if there's no questions, I will stop the recording and then we can take a little break until the next session. What time are we back for spatial? We're going to start that at 10:30. I'm in Eastern time, so 10:30 Eastern time.
15 minutes.
Yes. Let me here's the schedule again, just to take a look at that. So we just went through an hour and a half of fuzzy match. Yes, Charlene, I will send those workflows. I'm going to post them all on the Enablement Hub after all of the sessions today. So it's going to be probably late tonight, and these recordings will be posted on there as well. But it's probably going to be the end of the day because I have to save them all and then I'll put them. Of course, yeah. So this is the schedule for today. If there's no more questions on fuzzy match, I'm going to stop the recording so we don't have this end piece on. But if not, we can just take a 13 minutes break until spatial. Okay, I'm gonna stop this recording.